So, agenda item, welcome to the Audit Committee. Agenda item number 1, we're going to call to order and roll call.
Chair Seaman.
Here.
Vice Chair Price.
Present.
Member Gahn.
Present.
Member Allen-Plansky.
Present.
Member Karcher.
Present.
Thank you, Chair. You have a quorum.
The April 8, 2024 Audit Oversight Committee meeting is called to order. Oh, well, you just did that. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 2. Agenda item number 2, announcement regarding compliance with open meeting law. City Clerk, has this meeting been noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law?
Yes, we are in compliance, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is public comment. Comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. Is there anyone wishing to be heard at this time? Seeing none, I'll close public comment portion and we'll move on to item number 4. Agenda item number 4, for possible action to approve the final minutes by reference of the regular meeting of January 8, 2024. Is there a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Please post. The motion carries. Let's move on to item number 5. Agenda item number 5, discussion for possible action regarding audit of Economic and Urban Development Department, Parking Services Division, Front Office Payment Collection. Nancy Cardoza, Senior Internal Auditor, will be discussing this audit. Please go ahead when you're ready, Ms. Cardoza.
Good morning. This is Nancy Cardoza here to discuss the audit for the Department of Economic and Urban Development Parking Services. This is for the front office payment collections. This division is responsible for oversight of parking services within the city of Las Vegas and offers assistance to customers with parking fines, monthly parking, and other related parking services. The front office is managed by the parking services manager, the parking administrator, and the parking office supervisor. In addition to these members of management, there are 9 administrative support assistants that work in the front office. Parking services utilizes 2 different systems to help with their front office operations. The first one is AIMS, which is used for parking citations and fines, and then we have the second one, which is Sapphire, and that one is used for monthly parking. Our objectives when completing this audit were to determine whether customer payments are being handled in accordance with policy, that funds are appropriately secured, and that department management is monitoring compliance with policies and procedures, and that system access permissions assigned to employees are appropriate for their job responsibilities. I'd now like to discuss our findings and recommendations. So during our audit, we noted the following. Parking Services Management is not conducting periodic cash handling audits and inspections as required by city and department policies. We have recommended Parking Services Management document and implement a process for audits or inspections of their cash handling procedures. Our second finding is regarding count room access. Within parking services, there is a separate room that requires badge access, and it's used as a count room where deposits and other cash is stored. During our audit, we found that the badge access list for this room had over 200 employees with access to the room. However, when we reviewed an activity report for that room, only around 50 employees actually need access to the room. We recommend management review the access report and terminate any unnecessary access. Additionally, parking services should periodically review the count room access report. Finally, we reviewed system access permissions for the parking system Sapphire and found 2 former city employees still had access to the system. We recommend management terminate system access for the former employees and document and implement a periodic review of system access reports to verify former employees do not have access to those parking systems. We appreciate the support that we received from Parking Services Management and front office staff in completing this audit. Parking Services has begun working on our recommendations, and we will work closely with them to close them out. I'd now be glad to answer any questions you may have, and representatives from EUD and Parking Services are also in attendance.
Thank you, Ms. Cardoso. Are there any questions from the committee? Go ahead.
I believe later on in the notes, it says that 55 employees have access to the count room. Could you mind expanding on exactly what the count room is? And it still seems a little excessive, 55.
So the room is used for any cash deposits that they have. They also maintain their cash drawers in that room also. It wouldn't just be the front office. The reason that they have over 50 employees, and I'm sure you could probably explain more, is that it's not just front office staff who need access to the room. There's also a bunch of part-time staff from special events parking who also will go in and have their funds counted as well. So when we discussed with them, they noted that those employees still needed that access. However, they agreed that the 200 was excessive, so they're working on trimming that base.
Why would a part-time employee have access to a count room? I'm sorry, maybe I'm different up here, but I have count rooms that count a lot more than city parking money, and I would say we probably have 25 people that are allowed in the South Point's count room, like total. I mean, I can't get into the count room unless I go and get permission. So why are we letting, I mean, if the money should be counted separate of a part-time employee?
Dina Babsky, Acting Director, Economic and Urban Development. So the reason we have that many employees accessing the room is because we have special events that run over the weekend at night. And so whoever the leads are for those special events, they all make up the 55. So because we don't always have the full-time staff there that we do Monday through Thursday during work hours, so to cover the special events throughout evening, night, and weekend shifts, they basically come up to that.
Quick question. Could you give me a sense of, and if you don't know off the top of your head, I understand, the amount of money that Parking Services collects on an annual basis? I'm just trying to get a sense of the materiality of the number. If you have a number on hand. I mean, I'm not looking for a specific number, but how much, is it $1 million? Is it $2 million? Is it $20 million? Is it $400? About how much is it? I'm just trying to get a sense of it, if you have it. It's not urgent to this. But.
Right, for the cash room, it actually is not a large amount of money because our banks don't go over, it's $300 per bank, and there's a total of maybe 15 in there, so.
So we're talking about, I mean, when we talk about the cash room and its access, obviously critical, because, you know, Brendan and I both come from a casino background, securing that. But to get a sense of, like, what are we really talking here? Is it $4,000? Is it $400 or $4 million?
Yes, it's not $4 million. No, it's not like a vault or anything. It's just literally petty cash, basically.
Just literally, so it's in under 10,000?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
May I have a motion?
Motion to accept?
Okay, there's a motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Please post. That motion carries. Moving on to item number 6. Item number 6 is discussion for possible action regarding audit of Economic and Urban Development Department, Parking Services Division, Special Events Payment Collections. James Barnett, Senior Internal Auditor, will be discussing this audit. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. This is James Barnett, here to discuss the audit of Department of Economic and Urban Development Special Events Parking Unit. The Special Events Parking Unit is responsible for the oversight and collection of parking fees for special events within the City of Las Vegas. The Special Events Parking Unit is managed by the Parking Services Manager, the Parking Operations Administrator, and the Special Events Parking Supervisor. In addition to these members of management, there are between 30 and 40 part-time staff members that are assigned to, as needed, to the city's various special events, primarily First Friday and events at the Smith Center and Cashman Field. Special events parking staff use handheld devices with the Zip Park event parking management software for the recording of cash and credit card payments. Prior to each event, staff are assigned a handheld device and provided with a $200 change fund. At the end of each event, the staff gather at the city's parking office in the count room with a supervisor to reconcile the payments collected to what was recorded in the Zip Park system, prepare the deposits, and return the change funds. Based on information obtained from the Zip Park system, Special Events Parking processed 71,368 payments and collected $591,582, $301,774 of it, which was cash, during the fiscal year 2023. Our objectives in completing this audit were the same as those previously discussed by Nancy and shown on the slide. I'd now like to discuss the findings and recommendations identified in our audit of the Special Events Parking. The first two findings and recommendations in the Special Events Parking Report are the same as those found in the Parking Front Office Report and have already been discussed by Nancy. The first finding that I'm going to discuss is that we reviewed the appropriateness of Zip Park system access permissions and identified several deficiencies, including generic user profiles and accounts. An example of the generic user profiles would be admin, manager, etc. Generic user profiles are problematic because they provide access to the system with no ability to verify the individual who accessed the system. Use of such profiles make identifying the user who processed the transaction, making accountability difficult. To address this issue, we recommend that parking management review user access permissions across the Zip Park application, taking corrective action as noted to restrict inappropriate and unnecessary access. Consideration should be given to discontinuing the use of shared passwords and role-based user accounts, identifying that all active user accounts are authorized to use the application, and determining whether system permissions are appropriately allocated to each user. The second finding that I'm going to discuss is parking management has not maintained records of individuals who have the keys to the safety deposit boxes, which are used to store the special events change funds. This is problematic because there's no record of who has the keys, and if keys are lost, it becomes difficult to get them, because right now each box has two keys. One is maintained by our locksmith, and the other is maintained by the revenue supervisor, who is assigned to that change fund. To address that issue, we recommend parking management maintain a log of all safety deposit box keys in the department's possession, and develop, document, and implement a procedure to maintain a log of all safety deposit box keys in the department's possession. And the last finding I'm going to discuss is that the special events parking policy requires cashiers to complete a cash discrepancy explanation sheet when they have a difference of more than $40 at the end of their shift. During our review of a sample of 24 days of payment transactions and deposit documentation, including 399 individual cashier deposits during the period of February 2023 through July of 2023, we found that cashiers had $40 differences on 19 different deposits, and a cash discrepancy explanation sheet was only completed once. To address this issue, we recommend that parking management document and implement procedures to verify that revenue supervisors and cashiers are completing the cash discrepancy explanation sheet when required by policy. In consultation with finance, evaluate the adequacy of their current procedures for documenting payment collection discrepancies and make adjustments as needed. And in consultation with finance, establish procedures for tracking individual cashier payment collection discrepancies and reviewing the data for the trends. I'd like to thank Parking Services for their assistance in this, and I'm now available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. Before I ask the committee if there's any questions, on the safety deposit box, how much cash at any one time are in that security box?
It's just their change funds. I believe it's $400.
Okay, all right. Also, I have a couple of questions for the city manager's office. Anybody here from the city manager's office? Steve Ford, okay.
Good morning.
Good
Steve
morning.
Ford, City Manager, Deputy City Manager.
Good morning. With each audit report, Lisa, what are you doing to determine whether similar problems to those identified in the audits exist or are addressed in other departments?
I think we depend, again, Steve Ford, Deputy City Manager, I think we depend on the auditor staff to let us know how these are being rolled out. And going through those lists, we really depend on that department to kind of keep track of that for us.
So with the, for example, with the findings presented today, what is, are you going to do something to determine whether other departments are completing audits and inspections of cash handling operations as required by city policy, reviewing the approaches of SISTA's access permissions in the systems they use, and reviewing the appropriateness of who has a badge access in their office where they're stored?
Yes, ma'am. Again, for the record, Steve Ford. I know for myself personally, I depend a lot on the department directors to handle that, and if there's any discrepancies, that they bring that to us. We do not have a policy in place that I'm aware of in the city manager's office to do that systematically. I know I do that personally, and again, that's why we rely so heavily on the auditor's office to let us know if there are other discrepancies. For example, today, I believe it's on for the Parks and Recreation cash handling thing. We'll be talking about that as well today, right? Is that on the agenda? Was that on the last agenda? I'm sorry, I get lost. Either way, we also work with finance on how those policies are put into place and if there are any changes needed.
Do we need to add to the policy some of the systematic stuff, because you said you don't think it's in policy? Can we add it?
We would work with the city auditor's office to see if that would be appropriate. Yes, ma'am.
And you'll let me know?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are there any questions? Councilman?
A general question. It was interesting to note here on the payment and collections, the cash versus credit card breakdown. I've owned a small business in town for 17 years and watched the distinction between cash and credit. And in 2024, usually not many people play with credit card, and I'm a consumer too, don't carry around a lot of cash. So can you kind of speak to why we intake more cash than credit cards? It seems to, defy normal.
Can't answer officially why it is, just anecdotally and watching them do the collection. I think a lot of it's traffic control. I think it's faster when you're blocking traffic, especially on First Friday, to hand cash over than to do that. And I think people generally still pay cash for parking for whatever reason. But I can't speak officially as to why they do that. It's just anecdotally.
It was interesting to note, to see on the special event. So it's $300,000 in cash for the year, and depending on materiality and everything, as we all know, it's just cash by its nature needs to be heavily controlled, and sometimes it's a materiality issue, and sometimes it's just a strict control issue where somebody gets away with a little something, and the little something turns into more of something. So even though sometimes these issues don't seem as material from a dollar standpoint, they're material in that the control in place prevents greater losses in the future. When people know that every dollar is getting looked at, they're afraid to steal 10. So it's important that these controls maintain in place, and that we see them resolved. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Seeing no more questions, may I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Please post. The motion carries. Moving on to item number 7. Agenda item number 7, report by staff and discussion for possible action regarding an update on the audit recommendation with the status of incomplete. Brian Smith, Acting City Auditor, will you give this report?
Thank you, Councilwoman Seaman. Brian Smith, Acting City Auditor. Twice a year, we brief the Audit Oversight Committee on incomplete audit recommendations. And as you're aware, we've been through this many times. Prior to the finalization of every audit report, city management provides us with a management action plan and an estimated date of completion for each audit recommendation. These management responses are found at the back of every one of our audit reports. Upon release of an audit report, an audit recommendation is initially classified as not due, and once an audit recommendation's estimated date of completion passes and the recommendation has not yet been verified by one of our auditors, the classification is changed to incomplete. Once an audit recommendation has been verified by the auditor as having been addressed, the recommendation classification is then changed to complete. Over the past year, the city departments shown on this slide have completed a total of 47 audit recommendations. And we applaud the efforts of these departments in addressing these audit recommendations. Some of these recommendations take quite a bit of work on the department's part to address the recommendations. Sometimes it can involve updating a policy and procedure, creating a policy and procedure, training staff. So we'd like to recognize their efforts today. I'd also like to recognize the efforts of our own team in verifying the completion of these recommendations. This process often requires completing additional detailed transaction testing to ensure that procedures and controls have indeed been implemented. And essentially, it's like completing a mini audit of the audit that we just recently completed. So just want to recognize the efforts of our own team. As a result of our combined efforts over the past year, management controls and policies and procedures have been improved, and there is improved oversight of department compliance with the policies and procedures as shown on this slide. We are happy to report that as of today, there are only 3 incomplete audit recommendations, and these audit recommendations were issued to the finance department. Now, we had a late development on Thursday regarding these 3 recommendations. Susan Heltzley, finance director, sent out an email to all department management and directors and management addressing the 3 remaining recommendations. And we've not yet closed out these recommendations because we still have some questions that we'd like to discuss with finance. I'd now like to review through these 3 recommendations with you. So as I've mentioned, there's 3 incomplete audit recommendations that arose from payment collection audits at 3 community centers and a cultural center. We recommended that finance provide direction to departments on several areas, including the following: how to appropriately complete periodic audits of cash handling locations in accordance with the city's cash handling policy, procedures to follow when a change fund custodian transfers to another location within a department, and procedures to follow and the safeguards that should be taken when transporting deposits to a bank or another city location for armored car pickup. A representative from finance is in attendance, and in fact several of them are here, to give you an update on their efforts to address these recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay.
Were you drawing straws back there?
Before we move on, I just want to applaud your department for the work that you've done. I really appreciate the hard work.
Thank you, Councilman.
Go ahead, please introduce yourself.
Good morning. Susan Heltzley, Director of Finance, and like we said, I got the short straw. So anyway, we did send out an email on Thursday addressing these 3 findings, and after speaking with Brian, we've addressed 2 of them. It's 4.2 and 5.2. We're going right back to what you were talking about, Councilwoman Seaman, on making sure that we're following all those policies. Brian and I were discussing earlier that we're going to put together some kind of a checklist where people can look at the policy and say, are we meeting all of the safeguards? Are we meeting, if a cash person transfers, do we have that on file? If someone leaves, have we suspended their access? Have we changed the locks? All those things. So that's one of the things we'll be reviewing as we go through the policy to determine what needs to be on that checklist. And hopefully that will make our cash handling at the city a lot more secure. So we will be working on that shortly. I know one of the reasons why we haven't been able to address these as completely as we'd like to, we've been in the middle of a reorg in finance, and we finally have our reorg put together. So we have someone over our cash management. That is Corey DeMille, who's also in the room today. So we'll be working with Corey and Ariana to finalize these. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Are there any questions from the members?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Susan, is there any reason or possibility we should be working with Mr. Zamora in HR? If we have employee exit, perhaps there should be some sort of punch list that a supervisor needs to do this, 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 and this before the separation occurs. Seems like that would tie in well.
You know, Susan Heltzley, for the record, I think that could be a great idea. I haven't looked at our employee exit checklist in a while. I know we have one, so that could be something that we add, especially if it's a cash handling person. Did we make sure that they're closed off from having access to everything? So that's a great idea.
Just a quick comment, and it addresses the Councilwoman's question, is when we look at each one of these departments, we traditionally in internal audit will pick a department and then we'll audit it and then we'll move on to the next one. To her point and to this point, cash is kind of cash. Each department is unique and has its own intricacies and stuff, but cash is cash. So in that point where we say, yeah, we look at each department on a departmental basis, but do we ever pull back and say, cash is cash? So if we just looked at cash in every department and that as an audit area, we could look for consistencies throughout departments rather than cash as it's done in parking, cash as it's done at, at a city park event, cash is this. We kind of extract cash out of it and say if an auditor's auditing cash, how does that policy affect all the other departments, to try to bring that consistency to it instead of departmentalizing it, making it more, that's the abstraction. How do we handle cash in the city in general, and then push that down to each department instead of it coming up and then trying to compare them. Just a thought is about how we look at cash as being not a department type thing, but cash is the king, and then we push that policy down to each department instead of it coming up from the bottom. Just a thought in how we look at cash and its consistency. And then when you're auditing, it's hard to go from this area and then to this area, and then so if you're focused on cash, you just do cash for all the all these departments under review at one time. Maybe create some efficiency, and then in your brain, when you're looking at procedure, you start to really pick out those differences rather than putting it up and picking it down every time. But just a thought in how we look at cash from the city's perspective, kind of more holistically. That's all. Thank you.
All right, no further questions, statements? Okay, may I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
There's a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Please post. The motion carries. Thank you. We will move on to item number 8, report by staff regarding current audits. Brian Smith, acting city auditor, will give this report. Please go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Councilwoman Seaman. Brian Smith, acting city auditor. Our office is currently involved in the following 3 audits: IT assets, hardware, fixed assets, policy compliance. In this audit, we are reviewing IT's compliance with the city's fixed asset policy and procedure, including the recording and tracking of IT assets. Public safety, we're looking at the Marshal's evidence room. In this audit, we are reviewing public safety's controls over the evidence room with an emphasis of controls over high-risk items such as firearms, drugs, and cash. And then public safety, the jail commissary contract. In this audit, we are reviewing compliance with the terms of this contract by both public safety and the vendor, and a review of the management controls surrounding the receipt, storage, and distribution of the items that the inmates purchase, and also the process for reviewing vendor price changes of items available to the inmates. In addition to these 3 audits, we have started the process of opening up an additional 2 audits, but we're still scoping out these two audits and deciding exactly which areas to audit within those departments. And I will share more details of those audits with you when we do the formal notification of the new audits.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? All right. The item is a report only and no motion is required. We will move on to item number 9. Agenda item number 9, discussion regarding topics for further agenda items. Comments made during this portion of the agenda by individual members shall refer solely to proposals for future agenda items, and any discussion shall be limited to whether or not such proposed items are within the purview of the committee and or whether such proposed items shall be placed on a future agenda. No discussion regarding the substance of any such proposed topic shall occur and no action shall be taken. Does anyone have suggestions regarding future agenda item topics? No. Okay, we'll move on to item number 10. Agenda item number 10 is citizens' participation. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the committee. No subject may be acted upon by the committee unless that subject is on the agenda and is scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, come forward and give your name for the record. The amount of discussion on any single subject, as well as the amount of any time any single speaker is allowed, may be limited. Is there anyone wishing to be heard at this time? Seeing none, I'll close citizens' participation, and we'll move on to item number 11. Adjournment. The next Audit Oversight Committee meeting is scheduled for Monday, July 8, 2024, and with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.